The NFL draft is here, so James and I will be joined by Joe Goodberry and Mike Sans to talk through the Bengals prospects and what they'll do.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. Today, joined by two guests, Mike at Bengals_Sans Santagata and Joe Goodberry at Joe Goodberry. We're going to talk about all things Bengals draft today, as it is Draftmas, as they say. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. So hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button wherever you get your podcasts. Will be delivered to your device as soon as episodes drop. And guys, we're going to get into the 2022 NFL Draft. It is upon us. James is wearing his hot take chain. I can't wait for what's going to fly.
Who calls it Draftmas? Let's go. Right now. Who calls it that?
Right here.
Joe? Joe does?
Yeah.
That's it? Oh, okay. Well, I guess if Joe does, what he was the godfather of the draft, so I guess he gets to
the godfather of Bengals
Twitter
draft
Twitter. Yeah, Bengals draft Twitter. There we go. All right. So we need to change his name in YouTube. But yes, all right. If Joe says it, then it must be true.
People call it Draftmas. This is people
I'm
say
not.
that.
I'm not saying it's not. I mean, it's a
mean,
holiday for me. That's why I'm wearing the chain.
Not.
Yeah, I just don't call it that, but it's okay. I'm excited. I'm excited for the Bengals to pass on the best player that they could possibly get.
So negative to start the show
right away.
Wow.
Oh, okay. Anyways, what we should start with our best case, worst case. Clearly, I just tipped my hand on my best case, which is Tyler Linderbaum, 31st overall. But that's rude of me not to start with our guests. So Joe, Mike, whoever starts talking first gets to go first. What's your best case scenario for Thursday night's draft pick at 31st overall?
Go ahead, Mike.
I agree with James. Tyler Linderbaum is my best case scenario. Even I've deliberated by myself long and hard about Karlaftis versus Linderbaum, and I just feel more confident in the Bengals system that Linderbaum's going to be not just like a good pro, but like he really feels like he's going to be a Pro Bowl All-Pro guy. And you listen to if you're subscribed to Trench Warfare with Brandon Thorne, like Jeff Saturday talk about the guy, and you're just like, God, man, he's even hitting these things. I don't notice these things, like his hip angle of departure. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, I've studied offensive line. I looked deep into it, and he looked awesome to me. It's just the length is really the only concern, because even his strength, even at that size, is like really impressive.
And I'm just because I think I want to go a little different, because I think I know where James is going to go. I would also say best case is Linderbaum, but I'm going to say the other guy I would give an A grade to would be George Karlaftis, the edge out of Purdue. And I think he can be more than the edge, actually. I think he can kick inside and do a lot of damage inside there and go against guards where maybe his agility isn't such a hindrance to his play. But we're talking about a really powerful, young, very productive guy. And when he was 18 as a freshman, 17 and a half sacks, 17 and a half tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. That production usually carries over when you can do it at that age. I think he should be a top 15 pick, but I think this class, he's getting lost in the shuffle a little bit. That's okay with me. If the Bengals were able to scoop him up at 31, he'd get high marks from me.
I think that's the Bengals' best case. Like if we gave Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor and Lou Anarumo truth serum, they'd be like, oh, yeah, George Karlaftis. If he's there, we're going to dance the way I dance at the beginning of our show every day, all the way up to the podium and say George Karlaftis and get the hell out of there for round one. So that's not crazy. I think that's probably accurate. And based on what we know, Tyler Linderbaum might not even be in their top 3 or 4 or 5. And yet, yeah, he's my best case scenario as well. Because I think, and Chris Sims did a good job on Lapham's podcast of describing this. Like to me, and you know me, offense. But if the Bengals have this elite center, which I think he could be and would eventually be, and maybe he is as a rookie, maybe he is Creed Humphrey or better, right? You draft him earlier. There's a shot he could be just as good or better. It could take their offense to a whole nother level. And that's what I want. That's what I think the future of this team is anyways. And so whether it is a Tyler Linderbaum, or if they find someone else, they need to find one more offensive lineman, I think, anyways. And I think Linderbaum's the best chance of them finding an elite offensive lineman that could be that multi-time Pro Bowler. So, if he's there at 31, just turn in the card, Duke Tobin. Sabotage it all. I don't care what Mike thinks. Mike Brown, not you, Sans, or anybody else. Just put in Tyler Linderbaum, send it in, and we'll listen to our show because I think we'll be pretty happy. Jake, what about you?
I feel like Tyler Linderbaum would be a great pick, but I feel like if you go back to last year at this time, and I know that this is apples and oranges to some extent, but a big part of the argument in Jamar Chase's favor last year was positional value of wide receiver, positional value of an elite wide receiver. And at 31, getting an elite player is harder. And that's the argument for Linderbaum is if he's available to you at 31, you're getting a potentially elite player where there may be none others left in the draft. But if we're talking about a best case scenario, to me, it's getting an elite guy at another position, a more valuable position to fall to pick 31. And this is probably pie in the sky. It's probably very unlikely to happen. But say Trent McDuffie is available at 31. Trent McDuffie falls because teams are worried about his size, his arm length, his build concerns. He hits the other athletic thresholds, and by consensus is a higher evaluated corner than the guys that we've typically been talking about, the Kyer Elams, the Andrew Booths, the Kyler Gordons, his teammate at Washington. So to me, if we're talking about a best case, it would be somebody like that, a Trent McDuffie falling, an edge rusher having a precipitous fall that we don't foresee at one of these more valuable positions, and getting an elite player at a more valuable position than center. Now, if it is Linderbaum and he's the best player available and it's the only elite prospect left, I totally get where you guys are coming from, because talking about a Trent McDuffie or say, I don't know, pick an edge rusher you really like, maybe it is Karlaftis falling to that spot, you rather get the guy that you have a higher grade on regardless of position. But I just go back to last year and the year before, and the way that I traditionally think about the draft, and one of the first things I think about is premium picks for premium positional value. But at some point, the quality of the player does override that.
And that's kind of where I'm at. And that's where I was at with Chase, honestly, is like, all right, he's a freak. And I think the NFL, as much time as they put into that, they're stupid with center sometimes. Creed Humphrey shouldn't have fallen as far as he did. And I think Linderbaum is probably going to fall to round 2. And I'm going to be like, okay, Jacksonville, we'll take him, or whoever, take him early on day 2 and thrive. And, I'm not saying he fits that offense. I'm just saying teams that are there. And that's the part about it where, to me, it's players, not positions. I don't give a damn if you get the wrong corner. If you draft the next Darqueze Dennard, I'm going to hate it at 31. And I'm not saying McDuffie's that, and I get your point. I'm just saying I think Linderbaum is a top 15 player anyways, and the NFL is just more likely to let him fall than a corner because of that positional value, like you mentioned.
Right, and that's where it makes sense to me. Of course, the other side of this is the nightmare. The first round nightmare. You have the first round dream scenario of a guy falling to you, getting a blue chip player somehow at 31, which, let's all be honest, Tyler Linderbaum could be picked at 15. And all these guys could be gone. And more likely than not, when you pick 31, you don't get to pick between elite players. It just doesn't happen very often. There's a whole range of outcomes between dream scenario and nightmare scenario, though. But I do want to talk nightmare scenarios with Bengals_Sans and Joe Goodberry and James Rapien, and we'll do that coming up next.
But first, a word from Shady Rays. You got to get Shady Rays in your life if you haven't yet, because the weather's changing. Summer's coming up. You got vacations planned, and odds are you're going to be vacationing in the sun, unless, who knows, maybe you're visiting Joe Goodberry in Buffalo. Well, it's still going to get sunny there this summer, and that's why you need Shady Rays. Don't spend $200, $300, $500 on sunglasses when you can get Shady Rays for a fraction of the price and same quality. They look great. They fit great. You need to check them out at shadyrays.com. And the best part, you lose sunglasses. Everybody does. You break them on accident. You sit them in your car. You sit down on them, something like that. They break. Shady Rays replaces them for free. So get the shadyrays.com right now. Check out all of the different options they have. And maybe it's a Mother's Day gift. Maybe you just want to, get Joe Goodberry a pair for all of his draft content this draft season? Well, you can do that at shadyrays.com. Use promo code locked on, and you're going to get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. Again, use promo code locked on at shadyrays.com to get 50% off 2 or more pair. You can buy 20 pair, and you're going to get 50% off at shadyrays.com.
All right, guys, we talked about the dream scenario. There seems to be consensus among the three of you that Tyler Linderbaum is that. I'm not quite as sold.
Joe had Karlaftis.
He was saying it to be different, I think. Am I wrong about that? Saying it for the sake of throwing another guy out there?
Just to make sure we covered him.
Yeah, and that's important. Nightmare scenario. Joe, you deferred to Mike going first last time. This time I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, and it's passing one of these guys if they're still available, right? So here's dream scenario is available to you. It's Linderbaum, Karlaftis, maybe McDuffie is still there. Depending on how those corners shake out, I think there is a potential for that. And they pass and they go a little off script, or they go with the guys that have incomplete profiles. And for me, that's my thing. I kind of harp on it because I feel like that's where they miss the most. Going off script, meaning no one had Drew Sample as a second rounder. You don't need to take Drew Sample there. So do they reach a little bit? Do they see somebody that, all right, all the corners have gone. We like Martin Emerson next, or somebody, off right.
Oh my God.
That's what I'm saying. These are the nightmare scenarios. You should react that way. It's when they go a little bit off because the run happened ahead of them and they still want to address a position. We've seen them do that before. Or it could be maybe a guy still there that has been mocked to the Bengals, but has that incomplete profile because the run has already happened. Does that leave them Andrew Booth Jr. out of Clemson? For me, of the reasonable guys, he is the worst prospect of the reasonable guys in terms of what I expect for his upside. Number one, based on athletic and production profiles, but also because I don't ever see him becoming, even if he had all the things, the athleticism measurements, and he was healthy. I mean, that's another thing. He's got the health worries. Even if he had all that clean, I still would put him behind some of these other guys at corner, behind a Kyler Gordon, behind a Kyrie Elam, behind a McDuffie. And so I think once you get to that point and you're drafting the 5th corner in this draft, to me, that's not an ideal scenario. That's my nightmare scenario.
What about you, Mike?
Well, Martin Emerson would probably be worse than what I would come up with.
That was scary.
That's a wild one, Joe.
Nightmare on the Pete Rose way, Paul Brown Stadium way, whatever you want to call it.
The first one I could think of just from guys I've watched was if they go some of early draft Twitter's favorite, and DeMarvin Leal, where I watched him and I was like, he's getting blown off the ball. He's shimmying every pass move and can't get by any NFL level talent. Like, I just don't see him as anything, even I didn't even see him as a day 2 pick, but I understand he's got the production and everything to back that up. So like that guy would, that's kind of a nightmare, but out of the really realistic ones, I mean, there's that Trey McBride smoke. I know it's probably not happening, but I'm like, yeah, that one's a little bit of a nightmare to pass up Linderbaum and Karlaftis to take Trey McBride, who consensus ranking of like 50. I like Dulcich more on film just because I think he's more dynamic. Those two off the top of my head are like, yeah, that'd be pretty bad.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think to Joe's point, like if Karlaftis is there, and Linderbaum's gone, and odds are most of the top guys are gone if Karlaftis falls, and it goes hand in hand, right? If one of these big guys falls, if they pass on him, that's like insane to me, right? And so that would be the nightmare. And if you couple it with, oh, well, we got Trey McBride, I'm literally like, I should create a business, Joe Burrow needs more weapons LLC and just run that company, right? That should be my company. At the same time, I do not want Trey McBride at 31, especially if you're passing on an elite edge rush. I don't think they would do that, but nightmare scenario would be, drafting this pass catcher and they're like, yeah, he can block and he can run and he's going to have 350 yards as a rookie. That's not what I want at 31. I want the center who's going to play 1,000 snaps. So if they passed on Linderbaum for a guy or an Andrew Booth, honestly, I would hate it, because he's got the injury history. Joe, I trust you with the incomplete profile, all that stuff. It's like, we're worried about short arms and because he's, 8 pounds lighter than you want him to be, like, give him some Built Bars. It'll be fine. I promise. He's just better. And so, yeah, that's the scary part to me, because the window that they have and that they're playing with right now, if they get an elite player at 31 or just a good player, in not one of these swing and miss types like a Drew Sample, like a Martin Emerson at 31. Jesus, Joe, it would it'd be rough. And I remember, as we record this, it's Thursday. 4 years ago today, they drafted Billy Price. And so the wild part about that, he was the 21st pick, right? His 21st. He's not in the league right now. He's a free agent. So, maybe he ends up in the USFL or XFL or, on a back. I'm just kidding. He'll be in the NFL, but I don't want any more Billy Prices, even though they're picking 31, not 21.
Let me throw a few things out to you guys, because I think you've covered the things that would qualify for me as nightmarish. I think the rest of the things are not quite at the nightmarish point, but there's a couple guys that I think could be in play. So let's do a couple either ors here. The first, and this isn't as much an either or as a would you be upset if, or maybe you even like the other guy better. So maybe it's an either or first, and then it's would you be upset if. So George Karlaftis is available. Arnold Ebiketie is available. The Bengals choose to draft Arnold Ebiketie. Are you upset? Mike?
Upset? Like, I wouldn't have done it, but honestly, like, I see Ebiketie as a near first round pick. It's okay. You had a higher grade, whatever reason. Maybe it's a medical, maybe personality really didn't vibe. I don't know. That's close enough that I'm okay with it. It's not my favorite thing that they could do, but it's not Martin Emerson.
Yeah,
Joe,
I feel this.
Yeah.
First of all, that's Martin Juice Emerson, all right, and he's the pick at 63 in this scenario. But no, I wouldn't be upset. I would be like, I'd prefer Karlaftis. I think Karlaftis would be the better player. But you know what? They may see Karlaftis as a guy that kicks inside and wins that way, and that's less valuable than a guy like Ebiketie who can go, win. He's going to win on what he does. What he does and what he does on tape consistently is probably what's going to carry over, and he's going to continue to do exactly that and just swipe the hands down and cut that corner and just run at the quarterback at a 90-degree angle almost at these guys.
And on the rare occasion, he actually gets off the ball. It'll be really pretty. James.
And he could have that instant impact, right? Where he boosts, he gets the sack on Patrick Mahomes or the pressure you need on fourth down or whatever the scenario is. It's kind of like, I wouldn't be mad if they, like, let's say Zion Johnson fell, right? And Linderbaum's there. I think they would take Johnson, but I wouldn't be mad at them if they did that. And now it's not the same because those two guys, at least in our world, are higher rated, I would say, than the Ebiketie and Karlaftis duo. At the same time, I feel like it's kind of similar where it boosts that position group. It's just a matter of preference.
Okay, the next one is Nakobe Dean, rumored to be falling out of the first round. What's your grade for Nakobe Dean's selection? Let's assume the big guys are gone. Let's say it's Nakobe Dean versus Andrew Booth to make it a little spicy, because it's a linebacker versus a corner that you don't really want if you're Joe Goodberry, at least, and I'm sure some of you listening have different opinions about Andrew Booth. But say all the corners you really want are gone. Kyler Gordon's even gone because we know Kansas City likes him or what have you. And those are the best players that, and they probably wouldn't be. There's probably somebody else you can make up. But assume that that's the scenario. Who are you picking? Joe, we'll start with you this time.
That's tough. I'm glad you made it versus Booth, because that definitely tied it up for me a little bit, because I like Booth on tape. I don't want to get it twisted. I think Booth is extremely balanced and efficient with his footwork. He is almost never off balance and never getting out of position, and he makes the most out of the athleticism he has. I don't think he's a bad athlete. I think he's a good, not an elite athlete, but I think, just how calm and cool he is in coverage should translate to at least some ability. Whereas Nakobe Dean, I didn't focus on linebackers because I don't know if they will or where they'll take a linebacker at all, unless it's like a day 3 special teams type guy. But if the value is presented in this scenario, does it happen? And how would I feel? Man, it's tough, because watching the other Georgia prospects, because there were so many, Dean stood out and he did a lot of things. And he's a unique player because he's a bit undersized, but man, they used him as a battering ram at times, and he's looked good in coverage as well. And he can blitz. I mean, he can do it all. He can help your defense be something more than it is. His profile is pretty strong as well. I'm kind of leaning towards Dean here, and I hate it, but it's tough.
Mike, you like linebackers, right?
Yeah, I mean, between the two, just film-wise, I do think Booth was better, but everything with the incomplete profile, the injuries, if it was me personally, I don't know. I'd probably take the chance on Booth, but I'm not mad either way. I like them both. I think Dean's very interesting, and he's one of those rare linebackers. And I guess you've seen a few, like one every year now, that could keep up with a slot receiver on the bender, 3-up is 3 thing. Well, didn't work for Isaiah Simmons, but worked for JOK. So hopefully that 50% hit rate on these extremely athletic linebackers.
Darius Leonard.
Yeah, Leonard. The thing with Leonard, though, is he has a length, too. So that's one thing that does hurt Dean. His arms aren't very long, so he keeps up. He might just get mossed by that guy anyway. But I'd probably go Booth, but I'm okay with either one.
Can I take Quay Walker or no?
Sure, if you want a different linebacker, I guess.
I was just talking about no, I'm just saying instead of Nakobe Dean. No, that's tough. I would probably say Booth, I guess. I don't know. That's the thing. I wish I knew what they were thinking with Pratt. And that's the part of it that makes it a little more challenging because Dean's really good. But I could probably lean Booth.
If they take Dean round 1, they're probably getting rid of Pratt. But they don't.
Yeah, at that point, the writing's on the wall. They do have 3 linebackers that they drafted a couple years ago, still for 2 more years. So that's why we're not talking about linebacker very much, and why we'll probably continue to not talk about linebacker very much until maybe later in the draft if they take a swing somewhere. But Akeem Davis-Gaither and Marcus Bailey are also on the roster for those of you that have forgotten those 2 guys. Coming up next, we continue our draft show with Mike and Joe as we get closer and closer to Thursday night.
But first, a word from Built Bar, the number 1 protein bar on the planet. The Built Bar, or the protein bar that we need to send to Tyler Linderbaum if he gets picked by the Bengals, so he can add, a couple more pounds, a little more strength, since people are worried about that. No, the arms aren't going to grow with Built Bar, but it's going to give him that protein punch. It's going to give you that protein punch that you're looking for. Maybe you just want a healthy snack in the middle of the day. Maybe you want a post-workout awesome snack that's going to give you the protein, that's going to have low sugar, that's going to fit your macros, low in calories. Well, Built Bar is the perfect bar for you. So check them out at built.com. Use promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off your order. Again, to get 15% off the number 1 protein bar on the planet, use promo code LOCK15 at built.com.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap up our show here with, I think, a fairly challenging question. As we've all gone through our various mock drafts the last 3 days on this program, if you're doing them on Twitter, wherever you're doing a mock draft at this point, if you're not abusing the robots and trading back and getting like 7 second-round picks, then you're probably finding it somewhat challenging to fill every spot you would like to fill in this draft. There's probably a position that you're going to want to address early, you're not going to be able to. And so my question to our esteemed guests, and we'll go around the horn here, is if you have to punt on a position for the first 2 days of the draft, and you only have 3 picks, which position of need specifically, you can't pick kicker, do you punt on as the Bengals if you're drafting? And Mike, we'll start with you this time.
So my first thought is I don't know if this is a big enough need, but like I'd punt safety out of the first 3 rounds, but maybe that's not a big enough need. Maybe we just mean like interior offensive line, 3-tech edge, maybe tight ends in there. Maybe safety doesn't matter because you have 2 guys locked up that are both good and starting. Corner too, yeah. So if safety isn't an option out of all those, just to punt kind of sucks because one of my guys is one of them, but I guess out of the real needs, I'd punt tight end. Does that count?
I think that it could count. I think that's a position that the Bengals could reasonably expected to pick in the first couple rounds. And I think it's kind of the easiest one to kick the can down the road. So I don't think you're too off base there. Joe, do you agree? Do you have a different take?
No, I think tight end, because I think the maximum value of drafting one probably starts in round 3. So if we're punting it into round 4 and 5, I'm not mad about that. You're just putting it down a little bit further. And there's still a lot of guys. We run the simulations, right? It's not that tough to find a guy in round 4 or 5 that you like at tight end. So yeah, if I got to punt one of those. Now, if you really want to tighten this question when you come back around, I think it gets a little bit harder.
I am going to tighten the question. James, go ahead.
Well, no, I'll tighten it. I won't use tight end because it's easier to say that. That's the obvious one if you're not including safety. I'll say edge because I think they could find edges on day 3 that could potentially contribute and be those developmental guys harder at corner. I think you could go interior line too, but it's risky, and it's more risky when you're talking about the Bengals, who have been bad at drafting offensive linemen, to wait on that. So I don't want to kick the can down the road on that one either. But edge, it still leaves you open for that 3-tech early. It obviously still leaves you open for the cornerback, and of course my wide receiver option. So that's the one that I would pick, I think. And part of it has to do with the depth of the position and where you could get these guys in rounds 4 and 5.
I'm going to say something controversial. And it's partially because I think this is what the Bengals are going to do, and it's going to be offensive line. I don't think they're going to pick an offensive lineman in the first 2 days of the draft, and I can see the merit to it because you could probably get a guy in the 4th round that is good. I think this is a deep, and I think the middle rounds of interior offensive linemen are pretty good. And so the way I was going to tighten the question was going to be if you had to wait an extra round or two. So like you don't get your tight end in the 3rd round, instead you're taking him in the 5th round. If you don't get your corner in the 1st round, instead you're in the 3rd round. If it's that kind of punting, which position are you okay with deferring? And for me, it is offensive line, because I think that the interior, like I said, is very deep. And for me, the thing that Joe and I were talking about yesterday after we recorded that I've really struggled with is this looks like an amazing edge rusher class. And when you have really strong positional classes, something that we've talked about in the past is get one of those guys. When you have the generational class, it feels bad to have none of those guys. And it doesn't really feel easy to draft an edge rusher if you're the Bengals this year, because you're feeling that pressure at corner, at 3-tech, maybe at tight end, maybe at some of these other positions. But man, I think somebody's going to fall. Like Arnold Ebiketie, we've talked about him a few times, is probably a solid 1st-round pick that we're talking about at the top of the 2nd round. Like if the Bengals are picking 33 and 1 again, we're like, yeah, let's get Arnold Ebiketie at 33. But they don't have that luxury this year. So does that change in any way for you, Mike, if you're thinking about it a little bit differently, and tight ends just one, like where maybe you're not drafting a tight end at all? What's the next one for you where you would really hate to miss out on a position in this class?
Hate to miss out, or I'm sorry, am I answering tighten up that we're kicking an extra round down the road, right?
Let's say a position that you really like, that you would like the Bengals to get one of those guys because you think the class is strong.
Okay. Yeah. To me, it's corner. I love the 1st-round corners that I watched, and even some of the 2nd-round guys. I like those guys a lot. I think you take one of them. I see the edge thing. I think that corner is a bigger need out of those two. I don't think people are going to disagree with that. But when you think about like when they're tied, like this is a really good edge class, this is a really good corner class. I think, well, corner's kind of the need, so I bump it up just a tiny bit more.
Joe, what are your thoughts?
I'd like to flip it a little bit. First, you make a great point, though. I remember the 2014 receiver class, tremendous class, right? Everyone's like, oh, historic class. I'm like, the Bengals should take one. And they still had Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu, and they ended up taking, I want to say it was Mario Alford in the 6th or 7th round. I'm like, no, not like that. You should have rolled that dice on the Stephon Diggs, Tyler Lockett type stuff in the mid rounds. James, you remember we've talked about those guys for years now. Yeah, I'm with that point. Like, don't wait till the 6th or 7th to grab one of these edge rushers, because then you're not really getting into the strength of the class. You take one in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, I think you're still getting maybe 2 rounds where a guy would have won a little bit earlier in previous years. To flip the question just a little bit or massage it differently, I would not want to miss out on defensive tackles after 63. Like if you don't get it at 31 or 63, punt the position, because it's so bad. It is the worst defensive tackle class I think I've ever graded out. And if you're not getting one of these guys, the only guy I really even like is Curtis Brooks. And like, I think the cat's out of the bag at this point, and who knows if you're even going to get him, who knows if he's even going to get drafted. I just can't get a feel for it. But if you're talking like Matthew Butler in the 3rd round, Fedarian Mathis in the 3rd, 4th, light the pick on fire. It's not even worth it. Like at best case, one of those guys looks like a Brandon Thompson type to me, and Matthew Butler, which is fine. You get a good upfield burst, but he doesn't know what to do after that. I mean, you can have some value that can back up for you. But I want so much more with that pick. It's got to happen in the first 2 picks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's the thing with edge. And that's why I kicked it, is because of the depth. And I get it. You could make the same case for offensive line. Which one do you prioritize more? We already need the interior help, and it's super shallow. And if the Bengals if they don't take an interior lineman and a cornerback with 2 of their first 3 picks, people are going to be like, well, what the hell? And Joe's right. That means because they're going to take a corner. If they don't get that interior defensive lineman, then you better be calling Larry Ogunjobi or one of these free agents and getting it that way, because you're probably not going to get it in the draft, at least not someone that's going to contribute right away. So it's tough, because 31, I agree with you, Jake. Someone's going to fall, and maybe it's Karlaftis. And if that's the case, take him. If it's Linderbaum, take him, right? Maybe it isn't a corner and it's hard to forecast, but who you take there obviously impacts how you go through this path, this draft path. And ultimately there's going to be at least one weakness, maybe multiple. Like, just because they draft a receiver in the 7th round doesn't mean that that 4th receiver slot is filled, right? And so you could be looking like, you don't feel confident in their 4th receiver, maybe tight end. I'm okay with those spots if you're able to get an edge that can contribute right away, an offensive lineman like Linderbaum, a 3-tech. So but still, now you're looking at corner. Where's the corner coming from? So it's going to be tough for them to fill all of their needs.
And that's why it's so hard, is as soon as you diverge from what you want to happen, as soon as you don't go corner, defensive tackle, edge rusher, well, now you're not getting one of those. As soon as you pick a center in the 1st round, now you're not getting a 3-tech, or you're not getting a corner until,
Kobe Bryant,
Damari Mathis or something like that. You're hoping Damari Mathis is there for you in the 3rd round, or Alontae Taylor if you like him at corner in the 3rd round, right? And you might not get that, which is why it's so challenging. But Joe, I really like the way you put that. Set the pick on fire. Don't, what's the point at that point at certain positions? And defensive line, you're right, incredibly shallow this year. There's 5 guys that you're relatively comfortable drafting, and that's Logan Hall, Travis Jones, Jordan Davis, who's not going to be available to the Bengals. Devontae Wyatt, probably, although before we started recording, mentioned some reservations I have with his age and productivity profile, and Perrion Winfrey, who, on tape, probably a little bit more divisive, but at 22 years old, probably shortly after the draft, there's some real upside there with the way he plays and the way that he gets after the passer, at least on tape. Looks like a pretty good pass rusher and had pretty good pass rushing productivity.
So I've got an either or then, because it sounded like this could happen. Would you rather them go 3 straight offensive picks or 3 straight defensive picks? I feel like 3 straight defensive picks could actually happen in this kind of scenario we laid out a little bit. If it's like Karlaftis, so it kind of starts with the 1st pick. If Karlaftis and Linderbaum are there, right, and you kind of start it there, and they want to get a tight end in the 3rd round or a 2nd and wide receiver in the 3rd for James, just O-line, wide receiver, tight end. James would love that, I'm sure. So not what's more realistic, because you're going to miss out on the other guys then, if that's the case, if you go one or the other. Would you rather them go straight defense for the first 3 picks and then they fill in after that, or straight offense for the first 3 picks?
James,
what's winning them? What's winning them games in 2022?
Offense.
All right then. And that's the part is like, Lou, I love you, and I know you're pissed off, because not pissed off, but you're hoping to get your first round pick that's on defense. That being said, Joe Burrow is going to keep you in games and is the reason that any of you guys are still in town. So if that means you're getting Linderbaum and then you're taking, let's say it's Linderbaum, McBride, and who do you want to say in round 3?
Alec Pierce. I know.
We're talking 45 plus a game.
You would have to go the other way. You'd have to go Linderbaum, Alec Pierce, and then Charlie Kohler or something.
Or Dulcich. Fine.
Dulcich, yeah, I mean, absolutely.
If
sign me up for that. That
you know what I'm saying? Like
Wendell Robinson.
Okay, still probably, yeah, because it fills multiple roles. It gives him that quick.
He's a returner too.
And yeah, exactly. And so that's the route I go. Man, people are going to hate that. What about corner? What about this? Hey, what say you, Bengals Sans?
I mean, if you're talking Linderbaum, Pierce, and then Dulcich, that.
That's such a best case scenario for offensive players.
What's the other end? That like Karlaftis, McCreary, and then you get Perrion Winfrey round 3?
Yeah, yes.
It has to be really good on defense too to match that trio of offensive players.
But he said Robinson, so it would be Linderbaum, Dulcich, or whatever tight end you think there, and then Wendell Robinson. or Wan'Dale Robinson, excuse
me. Or Cross in the 3rd round at safety.
Yeah.
Nick Cross. Yeah. Sans hates Nick Cross, so don't put him on the list.
It could be. Go ahead, Sans.
Gut. Yeah. My heart wants to say offense with you because I do want the offensive lineman and I want the Dulcich and I want, I'm cool with the 4th wide receiver. Figure out the defense. Hey, Lou, you were a mad scientist before. I'll just do the hot take and stick with offense with James. I think neither, but I'm into this offense idea. If you're gonna go all out, go all out.
How many of those offensive players make a big difference in year 1? Joe asked a question, so he gets to go last. How many of these offensive players make a big difference in year 1 is my question. And ideally, it's the offensive lineman. And ideally, your wide receivers stay healthy. And ideally, Hayden Hurst comes in and gives you the productivity you want in the passing game at tight end. And they're not drafting a tight end who's going to come in and block as a rookie. And as we've discussed many times, tight ends generally aren't contributing almost anything their rookie year, even if they're good. It's very, very rare for Kyle Pitts to come along and be a rookie of the year candidate at tight end. So those are the reasons that I would push back against offense a little bit. On the other hand, the ideal case often doesn't happen. And the wide receiver probably is going to get on the field. And the tight end probably is going to get on the field. And solidifying the offensive line, and in doing so, adding depth to the offensive line when inevitable injuries happen along the offensive line makes you better there too. So that's how you argue for the offense. James, you want to interject?
Yeah, real quick. Sorry, Joe. By the way, my ideal, since we're doing this, Linderbaum, then Pierce. I just want to go on record.
Oh, okay.
Then you get the tight end in round 3. Just so we're clear. You get. I would rather have the better receiver potentially than the tight end because and that's just me personally. But that's not a shock to anyone. Go ahead, Joe.
Completing the offense is very intriguing, right? Like at that point, what do you need? You start thinking about like the replacement for Mixon
every week
in a year or two. Like that's it. You feel pretty good. Yeah, even if that's like Wendell, because then he can return. So that may even push it further for me on the offensive side. But at the same time, though, what does the negative, the inverse is that really leaves the defense thin with major holes and the future looking pretty bleak, especially if they can't extend a guy like Jesse Bates, because they've only got a few guys that are homegrown talent with Hubbard, who's already extended, Bates on the tag right now, and then the 2 linebackers, and that's it. They kind of
linebackers are old for rookies, for rookie contracts,
young guys, right. So they kind of need that influx. That's why I could see 3 straight defensive picks because you need that talent in there and that cheap talent. You can't keep signing free agents on the defensive side because that money has to go to the offense in the next 2 years. And when that happens, that defense is going to fall off unless you've already invested those picks. So I don't want to see that happen. So, I get it.
Yeah, I think ultimately I would argue for defensive picks for that reason, because eventually that's going to catch up to them. Like if they have to acquire 2 new safeties, a 3 tech, a corner, an edge rusher, and maybe a linebacker next year at starting positions, that's 6-7 guys you have to replace. And then they're going to start to have extensions to worry about on the offensive side of the ball. So at some point you need to get these young guys on the defensive side of the ball who are going to be part of your future core. This seems like a good opportunity to do so because they're so solid at 10 of their starting spots on offense. And yeah, adding some depth would absolutely be great. And getting to 11 starting spots would absolutely be fantastic. But I just think that ultimately I end up wanting the cheaper, controlled young guys on defense.
The argument is simple. You turn this one position group into this elite monster that puts the fear of Joe Burrow in every opposing defense every single week, and you reset after the 2022 season. Tyler Boyd's on the chopping block potentially anyways. Joe Mixon, that contract. And so you could free up money that way. They don't have to extend T next offseason. And I think that's the idea that they're going to just give him huge money. Let's backpedal a little bit. Chase is still years away from that. So it's really Burrow.
Alec Pierce, are you extending T Higgins?
But that's maybe, and it could maybe and maybe not, but he's Boyd's replacement. That's what happens. And then you find Mixon's replacement next year, which it sounds crazy, but that's what you're talking about. And now you have this loaded, stacked Herculean offense to go up against the Bills and Chiefs for at least a year. Maybe it is 2 years. Maybe you find a way to make it work for 2 years. And then it's, you bring it back where it's like, all right, that you reset a little bit. But yeah, you're not paying a tight end after this year. Not that you're paying Hurst a ton, but that's why you would draft a tight end. You probably wouldn't be paying Boyd after this year, the Mixon factor. And then you would pay Logan Wilson next offseason. So you would invest in some of these young defensive players. You probably would pay Jesse Bates in this scenario, even though I think they want to anyways, and it just hasn't happened.
So I don't know if anybody else had thoughts on that, but for the less extremist version, do you prefer them to go 2 offense, 1 defense, or 2 defense, 1 offense?
When are they taking the offensive player? Because I think third round offense is much worse for the things that the Bengals are going to draft than the first 2 rounds.
Okay, say it's first round offense, second and third defense, or first round defense, second and third offense. Basically, you could think Karlaftis and then 2 offensive players, or Linderbaum and 2 defensive players.
I would go Linderbaum and 2 defensive players.
Me too. Yeah, I shouldn't have given the example. I knew
that made it too easy.
Linderbaum. Yeah. Well, let's say it's lower down.
Because he could be the missing link on this offense, and it could still be that fire-breathing dragon every week.
Yeah, I think it gets more complicated if it's a different offensive lineman. If it's a guy that you're,
Kenyon Green and 2 defensive players, or Ebiketie and 2 offensive players.
I'd probably still go the offensive lineman, just because to me, offensive lineman in the first round, you can assuming you get the corner in the second round, and then you just live without, like, you get an edge rusher and you live without a 3 tech. That's kind of what I'm thinking to manufacture a pass rush.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I would probably say corner in round 1, and then you could do, the receiver in rounds 2 or 3, and then the offensive lineman in the round that you don't take the receiver. I would say a wide receiver round 2, offensive lineman round 3.
Even though I think Linderbaum is best case scenario, I do also think if you just look at the way that you find a lot of these guys, the day 3 pick on the interior of the offensive line, those guys are usually they're not usually, but like higher chance that those guys turn into starters, at least in high-end starters, than guys like, look at Creed Humphrey last year, the 3rd round pick. So like those guys are usually the ones that turn into higher end starters than trying to draft your cornerback in the 3rd round or 4th round.
But he should have been a first rounder.
Huh?
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's why if Linderbaum gets out of round 1, it just means the NFL's stupid. Not, and that's why the Bengals should run to the podium, going back to where we started today. And
you make a really good point, because I like interior offensive line depth. That does. I forgot I said that earlier, and now I'm reminded. Joe, you want to throw in?
I was just thinking, once you start talking about other guys that we could, like an Ebiketie or Kenyon Green, and I started, we talk too much about Karlaftis and Linderbaum, and who are some other like top 25 guys that could potentially be there? And would you be like, yeah, take them? Is it Devontae Wyatt? Is it Trent McDuffie? Is it Bernard Raymond? Is it Trevor Penning? Which of these guys, maybe Mike has got, I'd like his take on that, or any of those 4 where you're like, that's a great pick, or you kind of, if they're falling, let them fall.
Oh man, because I didn't love Raymond or Penning in the little bit I watched them, so I'm kind of okay with them skipping past those guys, especially because they have Collins now. That was a bigger deal when there was no right tackle. And the other one, Wyatt, it's not a smash, but it's a take him, especially if Linderbaum, Karlaftis, or maybe those guys just aren't on your board for whatever reason, and Wyatt is, and for whatever reason, I'm okay with that. I don't remember the 4th one.
McDuffie.
McDuffie. Yeah, my hot take is I'd rather they go get Kyrie Elam than Trent McDuffie, and I know that's not consensus, but I just think that he actually presents elite traits, and he plays the way I like the cornerbacks to play more than when I watch McDuffie, and he's bailing out of there, and he doesn't have great long speed. His recovery speed's okay, but not great. There's a lot there's like, he's going to be a solid corner too, but I don't know if he's ever going to be the guy to follow your number 1 wide receiver. While Elam, I'm like, yeah, that guy, if everything pans out right with him, that guy might be the guy to follow your number 1 wide receiver around and shut him down.
Daxton Hill for me, which is no surprise to a lot of, at least you guys, everybody on this pod, because I've been raving about him the past couple of days. I think Lou Anarumo has got to love him and would love the idea of having a chess piece like that he could move around. Is he going to play as much as, Linderbaum or Karlaftis or, a 3-tech, you could argue that. At the same time, I think him and Bates would be a lot of fun if you kept Bates, long term. And so, I have a little bit of a draft crush on Daxton Hill if he was there. That would be kind of fun.
A little bit.
A lot of it. Let's be honest. A lot of it. I might have an I Heart Daxton Hill chain somewhere.
You love those
I'm
Michigan
waiting
players.
for draft night. Do I? Who else?
Dax Hill, Chris Evans.
Well,
Yeah.
Chris Evans. I took one look at him in rookie OTAs and it was like, oh my God. Captain America. Yeah.
Captain America.
He moves.
The Human
man.
Torch.
He can move. What about you, Jake?
Yeah, Chris Evans was the Human Torch.
How about me? A faller that would make me very happy? Is that the question?
Yeah, you asked it. Or no,
Joe asked it.
Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, the guys we talked about, Linderbaum, Karlaftis, obviously, but Zion Johnson is the other one for me.
Yeah.
Like Zion Johnson's a plug and play left guard and does everything that they need him to do to me. So, we talk about the depth at interior offensive line in this class, but as far as guys that are falling, that one's way up on the list for me. And there might be another edge rusher that I'm not thinking of too. But since I don't think first round wide receivers in play, I still don't want a first round running back ever. So like Breece Hall, I get it, but I don't want it. And so, out of the guys that are fallers potentially, I just have a hard time seeing anybody I really want falling to 31 because the guys I really want are like top 15 guys,
Yep.
Like Linderbaum.
All right. I guess final picks in 10 seconds or less. You still taking Kyer Elam, Joe, at 31?
Yeah, as of right now, I think he could still be there, and I think he's high on the board. So, Kyer Elam.
Sans?
Yeah, Kyer Elam. I just raved about him.
I'm the same. I have not changed my predictive pick. I think Kyer Elam lines up, and if he's available, I think that's the way that would make sense.
All right, real quick. Duke Tobin. When Kyer Elam and Tyler Linderbaum are both available, George Karlaftis is going to be long gone. Think about number 9 having all the time in the world and 28 cutting back, running all over the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game at Paul Brown Stadium, and take Tyler Linderbaum. Right your wrong after passing on Creed Humphrey last year for Jackson Carman. All right.
Imagine being able to run to end a game.
Ooh.
To ice a game.
To
being
start
able to
a
run
game.
the ball consistently. To start a game, yeah.
To be
To have your
fair,
play action, to have
third
the
and
defensive
one?
ends not sell out on your play action boots.
Play action working?
Oh my God.
Samaje Perine getting a yard when you need it. Oh, yes.
Hey, man.
Hey, he can get 1 yard. He just can't get
1.1.
1.1.
Poor Samaje Perine, man. That's going to do it
Linderbaum
for
will
this
get it.
episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. We will have some live streaming stuff going on tomorrow, so check out Joe's Twitter, my Twitter, Bengals Sans' Twitter. James, you're going to be out at a bar, I believe, for a lot of the first round. Is that with Mo?
No, I'm going to be at Paul Brown Stadium covering the first round. I'll be at with Mo at like 3:00 in the afternoon.
Oh, okay. Before the draft. Go pregame
I'm gonna be
with
on,
James.
I'm going to be on
Drunk
site.
for work.
I'm going to be on site, baby. Let's go.
That's right. Go pregame with James before the draft and hang out with Mike, Joe, and I during the draft. Until next time, Bengals fans will be coming your way after the first round, whether or not the Bengals have made a first round selection. Until next time, Bengals fans, enjoy the draft, hoo-day, and have a good one.